All right, so just introduce yourself.
Okay. I'm Dennis Friesenkarper. I teach composition and conduct the orchestra at Valparaiso University. I came to the conference because my son is a leader, but also because I'm very interested in the music of the church. I compose music for orchestras and choirs and jazz ensembles, all kinds of groups, chamber groups. But I also have tried my hand at writing music for congregation. I'm a jazz musician as a player as well as an orchestral conductor. So I have an interest in music that has interesting harmony, music that has interesting rhythm. I'm a world music dilettante. I know a little bit about Middle Eastern music, and I've been to China several times. I know some things about Oriental music. With jazz, I've been interested in the African roots of American vernacular music, and I love syncopation, and I love the kinds of colors that those different kinds of world musics bring into the Western canon, but also into the canon of church music. I'm very fortunate that I worship at the Chapel of the Resurrection at Valparaiso University. Lorraine Brew is the cantor there, the director of chapel music, plays wonderful Bach preludes and postludes, and she also brings in, music from Zimbabwe and Taiwan and everywhere in between. So it's a privileged place to live there. My son Paul, wonderful guitarist, wonderful songwriter, and I'm delighted to see that this group has recognized what he has to offer, because he's got a lot of sort of the kind of classical savvy that very few sort of folk pop guitar players have, multi-instrumentalists. Also his background of working at Holden Village for a couple of years. He was involved in leading a lot of those kinds of things. So I was pleased to come here and watch him. I think as I reflect on my experience here at the conference, that one of the things that was most pleasurable for me and most exciting was in our opening event. There was a wide range of musical examples that were used. We had a piece from Indonesia. We had a piece that was clearly drawing on Eastern Orthodox chant, use of the augmented second. Scott Weidler led a prayer that was deeply worshipful, but clearly from slightly outside of our congregation's comfort zone. But what was interesting to me is that one of our undergraduates from Valparaiso identified that, I think that weird interval make it easier to remember. And I thought, what a fabulous insight into what to give a congregation. I believe that congregations are both overestimated and underestimated in terms of what they can do. They can catch on interesting rhythms as long as they're grounded in a pulse that they can feel. They can hear interesting harmonic and melodic phrases as long as there's some kind of background to hook it to. And there are a lot of things about intuitive musicianship, and I've been particularly pleased to see the emphasis on intuitive musicianship. I enjoyed the composition project time, I enjoyed the improvisation project time, and I thought they were managed in a very efficient, experiential way with a minimum of jargon, which gave plenty of direction for people who have some music background, but gave permission for people without music background to create some things. I spent a little time after dinner helping one of the people who had led a song, and we all couldn't quite believe that the real imitation that was modulating was actually what she had heard. Yes, it is. I spent some time with her. Yes, it is what she heard. And it's because it's something that's in the air. It's kind of a rock and roll, up a minor third, up a whole step, kind of, block chord sort of deal. And quite exciting and very affecting and wonderful theology. She's a pastor, So it's been a pleasure to watch people sort of blossom and take permission for beginning to create.
What do you think? Because as someone with so much as much training as you have, and there are, what would be your estimate of like the percentage of people here who have like a fair amount of training? Not as much as you've had maybe, but like, you know, that you would consider like trained musician. What percentage would you say they are?
Wow, that's hard. I try not to judge in that kind of a way. You know, there are a few church musicians. You know, Ben obviously is an experienced musician. There are several people who are experienced musicians, but they don't have like collegiate training, or at least you gotta come to a certain point in music theory before your vernacular music background starts to meet theory. You know, they're on parallel tracks for a while, and it takes third, fourth, fifth semester in theory before you get to the place where you can really understand what Miles Davis is doing.
Right. So, but tell me, as you watch the people with some training, what do you think the people with training get out of music that makes community?
I think that it is possible to get a new respect. There's one person here particularly whom I sense a real reticence, a very deep embeddedness in Moravian background, a real connection to the four-part hymnody, all that sort of stuff obviously moves him, obviously where he comes from. My guess is that a person like this is going to come away with a new, I don't want to say appreciation, but the opening of the possibility that maybe the congregation can sing some things that I didn't think they could, and also that music which does not have the harmonic density, which is really particular to the Western tradition. I mean, even I think when we hear South African choirs that sing in harmony and improvised harmony, I think that's partly missionary influence, but that's personal opinion. I can't prove it. That there is something to be gained by using music that is just melody, or that is primarily rhythmically generated, because it gives a different kind of experience. That's what I think that a person with that kind of background could get out of it. And also the confidence to stand up in front and lead with the voice, what Scott Weiler described in terms of how scary it was for him to get off the bench,
The organ bench.
Or the piano bench, one or the other, one of the keyboard benches. I did not grow up Lutheran, and so I was not familiar with, and I'm really not a fan of the cantor model where the person on the bench is leading the choir. I just think the choir does not get what they need. I don't care how good you are. The choir can't get the things that you need, nor can the congregation, except for a congregation that's well trained, and that's within a repertoire of particular parameters. So it is somewhat limiting, in spite of the fact that within itself it is extremely rich, it's very fulfilling, it's very rewarding. I think that the idea of allowing sort of lay cantors, if you will, to be leading, lay song leaders to be leading, with a recognition that there are going to be some mistakes, there are going to be some times when the melody is not completely accurate in terms of how it was notated on the page originally. I think that gives pause to people like myself of classical training, where we indicate our respect for the divine and our respect for the congregation through really careful preparation over time. I have chosen to not attend churches because it seemed to me that the pastor, nice person, pretty much speaking off the cuff, and I did not trust that he, in this case, I'm thinking of a particular case of a he, did not really respect my time and the importance of that sermon in my life. Mm-hmm. And I've felt the same way about some church musicians, that they just hadn't really spent the time to lead the congregation in such a way that the focus was on the text of the day, was on the building of community, that sort of thing. So I think that that's something to keep in balance. And I think that church musicians who've spent a lot of time preparing, who spent a lot of time practicing, who spent a lot of time rehearsing their choirs, have a concern that, is this just Facebook amateurism? You know, that everybody's got their own 15 minutes of fame, or 4 minutes, however long it is, for leading a song. And I think that there has been enough attention to detail, enough attention to what's the best way to do this in a loving way, to recognize that, yeah, there is a devotion to doing it the right way. We're not going to judge people who don't get to the standard that we think that they might right away. But I think the ability to integrate this, we show that we love God and we love the community by preparing carefully and making sure that our failures don't get in the way of the worship of the community. I think that there's perhaps some room to demonstrate that to people who come from a more practiced background.
Got it. Great. Thank you, Dennis.
Sure.